I feel like TikTok is kind of turning into Tumblr 2.0. And I don't know about you, but I don't love that. At least it makes for some interesting discussions. Hello, lovely people of the internet. Today, we are going to be talking about sexism and slut shaming. Specifically, that goes around in the online book communities and also kind of just general literature circles. We're going to be discussing some drama and some hot takes that have been kind of circulating around online lately, specifically on TikTok. But that is not to say that these discussions have not been going on for like years before this, because they absolutely almost certainly have. Before we go any further, for anyone who doesn't know me, hi, my name's Annie. I love reading, and I recently graduated with a degree in creative writing with a minor in English literature studies. So today I'm going to be putting my degree to good use by defending a genre of books that I personally love: romance. A few disclaimers before we get into the video. I will be talking a lot about gender and sexuality, but in a very binary way, because I feel that this is where most of the discourse lies. But this is not to ignore anyone's, gender or sexuality or exclude anyone from this conversation. I also talk about religion in a very vague way, but I feel like I should say that I am mostly referring to dominant religions in specifically Western/American societies. Mainly, I think Christianity. But from my very limited knowledge of religion, I think that could expand to similar religions such as Mormonism. But I just want to say I'm not talking about religion in a specifically positive or negative way. My stance on religion is very neutral. I was not raised as a religious person, and I'm not trying to judge anyone who was. So I saw this TikTok, and it really just reminded me of all of these hot takes regarding the romance genre, and I guess more specifically romance books that are a little bit spicy. And I've honestly been thinking about sitting down and talking about this for a while now, and even though I don't think I necessarily have any fresh or hot takes myself, I have some thoughts. Now, if there's anything that I have learned from my time studying literature, it is that religion is one of the biggest influences ever. Religious ideals have led to our modern ideas of women and their sexuality. More specifically, the very binary ways that we might view people's places in society, or specifically within gender and relationship roles. And this of course is then reflected in media that is created, but then it also influences how we consume and analyze media. It has created a bias, right? And mostly everyone is affected by these religious ideals, whether or not they are religious themselves, because it is just such a dominant part of society. And so predominant religious ideas often ignore or villainize women in regards to sex and sexuality. Right, for a long time, women's sexuality and sex life centered around men focusing purely on men's wants and needs. Feminism movements obviously have worked hard to liberate women from these limitations regarding sexuality and gender, but of course this specific type of sexism still exists. I mean, these ideas and limitations around women and how they engage with sex and sexual content have been around for so long. Christianity was introduced in America around the 16th century, so comparatively, feminism movements are a modern thing, and so we can still expect these sexist ideas to be dominant in our society today. So arguably, the problem isn't that books have sex in them. The problem is that romance books are usually written by women, specifically for women, and usually the sex included highlights or focuses on women's pleasure, and we can't have this because sexism. And I mean, maybe this is a hot take, but I would say that the romance genre is inherently a feminist genre, even though there is still plenty of sexist and problematic content within the books and the genre itself. I'm not saying that this is the best example of feminist literature or anything, but I definitely think that the romance genre is doing its own part in helping expand people's ideas on gender and sexuality, especially recently, where we are seeing more and more non-cis het white romances being promoted. Literature overall is slowly becoming more and more inclusive. I think it is safe to say, though, that sex has always been a topic of debate, especially as to how it is presented in the media that we consume and how that affects, like, the quality of the media itself. So there's this term called high culture, which is a concept that was introduced in the 19th century by this European culture critic, Matthew Arnold. And so high culture adheres to this kind of a rich white man society. The best example that I can think of high culture is Shakespeare, right? For plenty of people, myself included, Shakespeare is kind of just this bunch of historical gibberish. But his work was so influential, and there are ways that you can come to understand Shakespeare through study and analysis. So high culture requires a sort of critical study or a knowledge that you already have obtained through, like, your social settings to understand that particular piece of culture. And then the opposite of high culture is low culture. Think popular culture that is accessible to anyone regardless of your social standing, your class, your race, your gender, whatever. And this is like such an outdated idea, but it is still so prominent within our society, especially within literature circles, especially within academic circles, and definitely within online communities, but I do think it is a little bit more subtle. I feel people in book communities online are very quick to judge, but I don't know how many people realize that these judgments probably come from these subconscious ideas of culture that are ingrained with us. Like, there is a reason that classics are deemed higher literature than, say, romance books. But plenty of classic books have romance and sex in them. For years, men have been writing graphic sexual content, and it has been read and published without complaint or concern. And of course, men are still writing romance, they're still writing sex, and like, it might not be as bad as it used to be, but why is it that the romance genre gets judged so harshly? Despite all of this, like, sexist history, women have been writing raunchy and romantic literature for years. Women have always been sexual, no matter what a hegemonic patriarchal society might try to make us think. And while men have dominated the publishing industry for a very long time, women have always been present within the industry. Possibly the romance genre is judged so much now because it is such an openly popular genre. The romance genre became the most popular genre in modern fiction in the early 2000s. By 2008, it was a multi-billion-dollar genre. And last year, during the 2020 pandemic lockdown, there was a huge rise in romance sales. So it is still currently one of the most popular genres to date. Lauren Cameron wrote in The Romance Publishing Industry and Its Reputation, terms used to describe romance novels are often problematic and used to keep romance contained in a box. By calling a book an easy read, it implies that the readers of the genre are not intelligent. Porn implies that readers are only reading the novels for sexual reasons. To categorize every romance novel as an outlet for sexual frustration diminishes the genre and woman. Finally, trash implies that the novels are bad, when the entire point of romance is to examine human relationships. So, despite its popularity and despite its success, and despite its arguably deep and emotional and mature themes and content, romance is despised by so many and is probably one of the most problematic genres. Earlier this year on TikTok, there were several users and several TikToks going around saying that anyone who reads smutty romance books were porn addicts, and that promoting the romance genre was not okay. They didn't say not okay, but I'm not going to quote any of the things that they actually said about the genre because it was very negative and nasty. And of course, people were quick to defend romance. You know, just because someone enjoys smutty romance doesn't immediately make them a porn addict. Romance is a very safe genre for many people, especially people who've gone through relationship or sexual abuse. These books and this genre can help people process their trauma. And at the end of the day, women's enjoyment, women's pleasure, women's happiness is not bad or dirty or disgusting or any of these other negative things that people were saying. Some people were even arguing that reading porn is a more ethical way of consuming porn. And while it's no secret that the video porn industry is very corrupt and has a plethora of issues. That isn't something I can get into because I definitely don't know enough to start a discussion about that. And while I am personally a big enjoyer of romance and smutty romance, these issues that these people brought up I do think were valid. Porn addictions are a serious thing, and I think the way that smut and sex is depicted within romance books is something that should constantly be analyzed, as there are still plenty of harmful depictions of sex being published. I might end up doing another video on that because there's definitely an in-depth discussion to be had, but the problem with all of these issues though is the way that they were brought about. We can't grow or progress by judging people and shaming them. Women's sexuality and what counts as liberating women from sexist ideas is another discussion that I think is too big to have in this video, but I firmly believe that shaming women for enjoying sex in any way is not a cute, hot, progressive take to have. How are we supposed to outgrow sexist society? How are we supposed to fight for women's equality if we are enforcing limitations on each other? If we're all judging other women? I just don't think it makes for a productive conversation. You can critically analyze something without judging and shaming anybody. This is a very nuanced conversation, and certainly I feel like this is only the start of what could be a much bigger conversation, but that's really all I have to say for this video. I would love to hear what you guys think about this, if you have any thoughts on the topic, especially if you don't read a lot of romance, because obviously as someone who reads romance, this whole discussion from my end is obviously biased, but I hope I brought out some interesting points of discussion regardless. I haven't ever made a video like this, and it's been a hot second since I've written any kind of serious essay, so any feedback on this video would be welcome, but please be kind. And I hope you enjoyed watching something a little bit different on my channel. At the end of the day, we all like and enjoy different things, and I mean, when it comes to reading, really just read whatever you want because it's for your own personal enjoyment.